logging in. A couple of things. If you want to add your name to next to your color in the upper right corner, that's a good way also for us to identify who's typing at any given time in the Etherpad, and you can just type it into the little text box next to the color. You can also change the color if you'd like. Sometimes some colors that your default given do not give you very good contrast. So this is going to be a quick call to review some of the general questions that people have about our fellowship application, which is currently open until May 14th. And this is for anyone who is working in the research sciences and wants to work on open science projects, to be funded for 10 months with benefits and a lot of stipends for travel and for equipment purchase, and some mentorship support from the Mozilla Science Lab team to work at their local institutions and pursue those projects. And we do this because a lot of times when you work at an institution or a university, you don't get the same kind of bandwidth to explore open science or open source because you have to focus on publications and you have to focus on tenure track requirements. Oh, someone else is joining. Hello, Jacob. I guess you joined. Maybe he's joining. So let's get to the questions. There's an FAQ on line 22, which answers a lot of questions that people typically have about the fellowship. This is our third year in running it, so we have previous years' experience to inform how we've structured this fellowship. But the first question regarding the fellowship's amount of expected time for work, it suggests 20% to be used for personal research. This is budgeting on 40 hours time, or is it considered a smaller subset of time to base it off of? Yeah, roughly 40 hours time, I would say. Maybe less, maybe something like 35 hours. It depends on what week, actually. Sometimes the fellowship will have a trip that we take as all of the fellows come together, so we fund you to go to a particular location and co-work, and that kind of consumes your week sometimes. If you're attending a conference that we're paying for, or if you're speaking at something, you might feel like you invest more in the fellowship during one particular week than you do in the other weeks of the month, and that's pretty normal. The only reason we really give, and I'll type this afterwards so that it's a bit more explicit, the only reason we ask people to budget for 80% of their time is because in the past we've had people who apply for the fellowship and don't understand that it isn't just money that they get to do whatever they want and never talk to us again. It's important that you're prepared to engage with us continuously and attend. We have these every other week. We have a call with all of the fellows, and we ask that all of the fellows join the call and report back about what they're working on. And we don't monitor our fellows too closely, but we do like you to be available for regular check-ins. And so we say in the frequently asked questions and in the application that you should be prepared to invest some time in this because it's essentially a year's salary for 10 months. So we do like you to be engaged and not totally detached from us. But how you work that out in terms of your own time management is really up to you. So let me just type some form of that. Depends on when in the year. To negotiate. We're also GSOC sponsors, which is the Google Summer of Code, and we receive a lot of applications from undergraduate students who want to work on projects that we sponsor. And one of the GSOC requirements is that they be willing to devote 100% of their time. So all of these very lovely students have been writing to me and saying, I can work 45 hours a week, I promise you. And you're like, no, you shouldn't have to do that. It's okay. Don't stress out. But they really want to be chosen, so they feel like they need to overcommit themselves. And we're definitely people who understand work-life balance and timing. Our fellowship is constructed to coordinate with your regular life. And that's why we provide benefits for families. That's why we support families to travel with you sometimes. So it's not, we're not really mean about it. All right, how much experience are you looking for in terms of leading open science related projects? This is a good question. We like to know that applicants have some experience with the concept of open science. As like a guiding methodology for their work. That doesn't mean you have to have a very popular open source project that many people contribute to related to your scientific research, but it does mean that you should know why people are interested in open science and be excited about supporting those initiatives moving forward. So mostly in the application, we're just looking for people to admit that they understand what open science is and how science, like typical science practice, sometimes isn't open. And we like people who are enthusiastic about open science because the fellowship is really made to encourage people in your communities and institutions, as well as in your broader network, to be excited about open science. About the question on potential projects, what are you looking for? Well thought out projects or just initial ideas? Initial ideas will work. The reality is that most people apply with some very quixotic idea of what they want to work on, and then when they get the fellowship, they end up changing totally and working on something very different. And I think that's consistent with a lot of applications. You know, whenever you write a grant application, you always write all these things that you're going to do, and then later when you get the grant, right before the grant is due, the grant report is due, you're like, oh, I promised all these things. Like, now I need to figure out how to say, yeah, sure, we kind of did that, but we didn't really do that because we realized this and this were complicated and we didn't end up making that happen. So I think it's pretty normal, but one thing I do like, that's why we still have that question in the application, where you have to kind of talk about what kind of projects you want to work on. I feel like I remember applicants more when they have some kind of creative idea or they have something that they said, well, this is something we need in our institution related to open science. This is something I'd really like to work on. So people who are passionate about open science ideas are more important than people who have already implemented those ideas and have a very sophisticated outline of what they need. The application is actually pretty restrictive. You're only able to put in like 50 words in some cases, which is a couple of sentences. So you can't get very specific with the type of project you suggest. So I would just try to come up with some broader concepts and ideas that you want to work on, and then the purpose of your fellowship is to kind of groom those ideas and decide what is going to work for the tenure of your fellowship. So I'll write that down. here's a question. This sounds awesome. Yay, I'm glad you like it. But would it be okay to expand a project you have already started? Yes. Yes, definitely. I'm trying to think of an example. Oh, yeah. So one of our former fellows in the first year, Jason, had already been working on this kind of handbook that he was developing for biomedical researchers to showcase in kind of a graphic visualization how open they were with their practices and how willing they were to return data to participants in their biomedical research studies. And he'd been working on collecting this research for years, but he hadn't visualized it necessarily yet, and it was kind of a bunch of text documents and publications. So he proposed to work on that throughout his fellowship, and we were very excited about seeing that project to fruition. So he ended up working on that. Part of his fellowship involved hiring a designer to help him visualize that. So he had a little grant fund from Mozilla Science to hire the designer and collaborate with him and really complete it. We also have a really broad network at Mozilla of developers and designers that are at your disposal as well. So if you're awarded the fellowship, we can pair you with designers and developers who can give you advice about how to pursue things and maybe make prototypes for you. So it's great to apply with a project idea that you kind of worked out already, because it means you get to work on it really assiduously throughout the 10 months. So yes, totally. Awesome. I'm just going to say we encourage this because I said a lot there, but I recorded this so anyone can watch it afterwards. Cool. So does anyone else have any questions? Oh, there's another person who's signing in. Yay, Brooke. Oh, okay. When working on projects. Oh, well, while this person's typing, I'm going to say a few other things that are typical questions too. A lot of people ask, is it open to anyone from any country? And yes, it is. It's open to all countries. We have applicants from all countries. Last year, I think we had applicants from only about 40 countries, but that's still a lot of different countries. And we also accept applicants from all scientific disciplines. So in previous years, our grant was structured so that we could only accept life, physical, and natural science applicants. But this year and last year, we loosened it a bit. This year, it's open to physical, natural, life sciences, social sciences, as well as the library sciences. So it's really broad. So we do love people who are focused on scientific research in the hard sciences, because that was our background. But our funder this year is very excited about supporting people who are doing social science research as well in and around the sciences. So however you apply open science to your discipline, we're excited to read your application. So let's see what this question is. When working on projects, do fellows need to fill out regular reports on progress for projects, monthly or biweekly, for example? Not really. We have a biweekly call with all fellows, 4 in total, and myself, and they report back about what they're working on. We have a little fellowship repository. Oh, I should be verbalizing this. I'll finish typing it and then I'll talk through it. And each branch of the repo has a resume. I'll put the accents in. I don't know if there's any French people on the call, but they like accents. Resume, where you Okay, so, oh, I spelled exercises wrong. Oops. So we don't really have a regular report system. You just kind of report to me. And we have calls every 2 weeks that the fellows attend, and they're usually about an hour long, and each fellow reports back about what they're working on. And it's pretty social and fun. It's not really stressful. There's also a repository that all the fellows are added to on GitHub, and that has all the exercises that help kind of groom your project. So there are little exercises to define a problem statement and to write up an abstract, and very simple things that usually most people have done, but usually they've done it in a very stressful, like, I need to get this paper in kind of way, and not in a, like, I've had time to think about this very clearly, and now I'm going to test it and beta test it with the other fellows. So, so we give you time to do that, and we help you with that. And every branch of the repository, so each fellow makes a branch, and we teach you how to do this. So if you're not comfortable with GitHub, it's okay. Each fellow makes a branch, and then they have a markdown file that's called their resume, and that's usually where we ask them to write down. We have a template, and they just add in what events they've attended, what teaching or training that they've done, where they've been in the world, what kind of projects they're working on, and where the documentation exists for that. And the reason we ask them to do it is because at the end of the fellowship, when we do our offboarding, which is a trip that we bring all the fellows to one particular place, this year it'll be in South Africa, last year it was in Nairobi in Kenya. So it's usually a very lovely place that maybe you haven't traveled before. And we all work together and look at each other's resumes and talk about what you learned from your fellowship. And it's very helpful to have a catalog that you kind of incrementally keep up throughout your fellowship. Otherwise, you get to the end and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do for the last 10 months? I can't even remember. But there's no formal reporting process. I usually reach out to your advisors twice in your fellowship to make sure things are okay and to give them feedback on what you're working on, what your updates have been lately, and but that's very informal as well. So, so I hope that helps. Yeah. Are there examples of past successful projects? Oh, sure. So I'll verbalize that again. Are there examples of past successful projects to get an idea of what type of things work best with the Mozilla Fellowship Network? Yes, definitely. A lot of our fellowship projects are on Network Pulse, which is our tool for cataloging all of projects in the network that are open source. Let me find the URL for it. Pulse.io, I think it is. My internet's being very slow. Oh, Mozilla Pulse, that's what it is, I think. So, bye, person that I didn't meet but looks very nice. Oh, I can't hear you, but it's okay.
Person.
Oh, hi, I'm Aurelia. Very nice to meet you. Cool. So Richard is a former fellow, and he made a project called the Command Line Bootcamp, which was very popular. It was a little in-browser interface for playing with commands in terminal or in your, I guess the equivalent in Windows, but it's in the browser and it ran on Docker. So it was easy for people to test out those commands and learn from them without feeling like they were going to mess up their computers. So he did that training for a lot of, and he gave this training to lots of bioinformaticians in Sudan and Kenya, where he lives. And that was very popular and was forked a couple of times by different people who wanted to define their own command line bootcamp for people. He just built another project called, it's not Open Citations, Open Retractions. open retractions, which was very cool, and that allows you to see like current retractions, paper retractions. And he actually just did an interview with Science magazine, which is very strange because you think they would be very opposed to it. But that's another example. And let's see, who else? Joey made a project called the GeoPrimer, I think, that was like a geospatial testing tool so that you could play with different visualization concepts in geospatial data, and it was a kind of MOOC online, and I think he tweeted it. Let me see if I can find the URL for it. Joey. We often retweet our fellows' work, though. That was very popular. And Christy worked on a course, so she was teaching at the time that she did her fellowship. So she worked on a course called Research Quantitative Methods. And it was an open source curriculum. To teach people, how to reuse other people's data. She originally made it for her ecology department, but then she open sourced it as an agnostic curriculum. So those are some examples. Pretty much anything goes as long as it relates to open science. So some of our fellows too are a bit more participatory, and they run a lot of events. So like Danielle, who's a neuroscientist, she's based at Oregon Health and Science University, and she has a study group meetup that talks about programming and inclusion and data reuse and data rescue, and she runs a lot of data rescue events. So it's pretty open to how you want to interpret what your fellowship time is best spent on. Let's see, last question. Does Mozilla have an institutional review board, an IRB, for providing overview of experiments that require participation of people similar to what we have to go through with universities? No. We do not have an IRB. We have a legal team and lobbyists who proofread and support all of our advocacy campaigns. And so they are at your disposal as well. And we do consult them before we release projects. The Mozilla Foundation's position on political or pseudo-sensitive issues is something we have to vet through legal. Mostly because we're a nonprofit, which in the States means that, oops, sorry, I'm gonna go nuts. It means you can't endorse a political agenda or a perspective on privacy strongly in the public. You have to advocate indirectly for things. So it's a bit complicated, but it hasn't obstructed us from supporting open science things, or we ran a campaign recently that was a petition to allow people to have access to publicly funded research when it's publicly funded, and that was on our Twitter for a while. It's very common in the States for grants to be given, public research grants, which are taxpayer funded, to be given to scientific institutions that then don't share the data, which is weird. that we can't take political stances on certain topics, but we're strong advocates. The only person that I guess would have some context on this is Jason, because he worked at the Mount Sinai Medical Institution and he was dealing with personally identifiable information or a lot of biomedical research data. So he had an IRB that was very assiduous, and one of his projects that he proposed in his application, he wasn't able to get IRB approval until about 2 weeks before his fellowship ended. So it can be kind of a nightmare to deal with IRBs. We're a bit more relaxed about it, and we do. One nice thing is that because you're working with a larger tech companies have way more legal resources than most institutions do for protecting their ideas and their projects. And so we do support our fellows pretty substantially with legal support if you need it. So there's that. Okay, cool. So I think that was it. Thank you for joining, all the people who joined. It was very nice to meet you all, kind of. I've only seen one person, Katya, but everybody else, it was nice that you joined as well, and thanks so much. We'll be doing this also next week. I'm going to pick a different time so it's better for different time zones, but I'll announce it on Twitter. And I hope you apply. Please do apply, because all of your institutions look very good too. So, good job. Cool. And I'm also happy to answer any other questions if you want to email me. I'll put my email at the bottom of the pad at mozillafoundation.org. You can email me directly, because I'm the fellowship coordinator, I guess. So that means I read all the applications and I run the fellowship program afterwards. So although my two colleagues, Xana and Steph, do have input, and they do interview candidates. So, but if you have any questions, I know all the details. So feel free to email me, and have a lovely day. And thanks so much for joining. Bye, everyone.